Hi history lovers, I'm at local to me manor Blakesley Hall, and tonight I'm doing a candlelit tour here, so hopefully I'll be able to share some interesting history from the hall with you. Hi history lovers, I had a fabulous time at Blakesley Hall last night, and today I'm going to share some of the information about Tudor living that I learned while I was there. So Blakesley Hall was built in 1590 by a local merchant to Birmingham named Richard Smallbrooke, and he was a major merchant in the area at the time, and it was a wealthy family home because of the origin of its building. So while I was at Blakesley Hall, I learnt some strange Tudor habits that we may see as bizarre today, and I'm going to be sharing some of them with you now. So the first thing that was a bit bizarre was that when Tudors went to bed, they would still be sleeping for around 7 to 9 hours. However, they would not have the sleep in one go. They would split their night sleep into 2 halves with about an hour or 2 hour interval. So they would have sort of 4 hours sleep, get up for 2 hours, and then they would go back to sleep for another 3 or 4 hours. Now, when they were doing this, when they would get up, they would either go to the toilets or the bedpan, and they would play cards or get a bit frisky. They would literally pass the time and then go back to sleep, and this was perfectly normal for them to do. People were even known to start eating again, so it might be that they were a bit peckish and thought, oh, I'll have some of that meat that I left over from dinner time, and they would literally just get up and start the mini portion of the day once again, which is totally bizarre to us that sleep through today. Obviously we have totally different routines. And before going to sleep for the first time, that is, every member of the household would pray. They would get down by the side of their bed and make a prayer, whether it was about their personal health, the crops that were being harvested, or general weather or life, things that were going on at the time. Everybody would probably have a different prayer, but they would all make sure that they say their prayers before going to sleep. They may even pray to get back up in the morning. And when they did get back up after the break, after the 2 parts of the sleep, when they got up for good in the morning, they would then pray again for waking up or for the day ahead. Now, when it comes to bedtime, another thing that differed greatly to us is that the beds were made smaller, and it was not only because of the height difference from the Tudor period to today, because it wouldn't warrant the beds to still be that small. It's because Tudors would like to sit up in bed. They believed that sitting up made them less susceptible to dying, and also it would keep their mouths shut, and that is a way to prevent the monsters to come, or witches, and access their body via their mouth. So that is another thing that is totally different. And men, listen to this one, men, you would not even get a pillow. Ladies would get the pillow behind their back where they would be sleeping. Men would be expected to sleep up the hard wooden oak headboard, because you're men, you're supposed to be tough. You can't have luxuries like a pillow, you know, even if you are sitting up. And also, sitting up told the Grim Reaper, if he came to visit you during the night, this person is not ready to be taken from this mortal world. So Tudors would not lie down in bed. Also, if you were feeling sick or ill in any capacity, you would not get into bed. They believed it was a bad omen, and it would be quite uncomfortable, so bed would not be the place. It would probably be a comfortable chair in the living area instead. Now, another thing in the bedding area, that 4-poster beds had curtains. We know that in living thatches that the top covering of the bed was very important, so that things like spiders, mice, birds couldn't fall on you while you're asleep. However, the curtains at the side were also needed for a variety of Tudor reasons. Okay, so one reason was for privacy, in case any intimate activity was to take place, or you just didn't want people looking at you while you were snoring, if you could snore in the uncomfortable position that you were in. Of course, as well, it's there to keep out those monsters, witches and spirits, and of course the Grim Reaper that's trying to get into your bed. Putting a curtain up is going to make it just that little bit harder for them to get access to you. Now, there's another reason that may shock you, because it certainly did me. It was to stop moonlight touching the skin, as this was thought to make people go insane. and people that were most at risk were pregnant women, because at the time it was thought that if moonlight hit the pregnant woman's skin, the baby would be born insane. And this is where we get the term lunatic from. It means crazy, and lunar in lunatic refers to the lunar calendar of the moon. So that is really interesting. That's from the Tudor period as well. Also, couples that were engaged to be married could sleep in the same bed, but of course there were conditions. It wasn't like today where we could carry on our day-to-day lives and be a couple without marriage. No, in those days, if you were not married or in holy wedlock, you would have to have a bolster, which was a massive either wooden or metal portion that ran straight through the bed to keep the couple, the engaged couple, apart. And it was the only proper way and socially acceptable way to sleep with your fiance if you were unmarried. And if they weren't your fiance, you certainly should not be lying with them at all, and you would bring great disgrace on your family and your own name. Now we're going to go back to the witches, because in Tudor times witches were believed to be a real threat to everybody around, and even more so to the rich, because they would be trying to steal their wealth. Now, the idea of witches in Tudor times came from the fact that older women may become homeless when their significant other husband dies, and that would be because women could not be landowners. The husband could write in his will that the lady could stay in the house, however, she could not ever own property. And many of these women that didn't have the clause written in the husband's will would go on to be dairymaids, herbalists, and other professions that would take them on. And literally, herbalists particularly became known for witchcraft because of their mixing of potions and so on to sort of try and improve health. And this is where the idea of witches became popular, and it became quite daunting for a lot of Tudor superstitious people. So it's no wonder that overnight a fire was kept at a simmering level. It was always on. The embers were always burning, because a witch or a monster may try to get down the chimney and access you and your wealth and the house, and we just don't want that. So the fire was always on a peppering level for this reason, even though this was probably very dangerous because they were wooden houses and they could quite easily go up in flames. It was more of a threat to have the fire on, but obviously in Tudor times they would not have that. It was more of a threat that these witches and these monsters would come and take their wealth or their lives, or the Grim Reaper even. A peppering fire on its own would not be satisfactory in protecting the house, and a poor old manservant, and it had to be a man in those days because women were not strong enough, they thought, to protect the property. Very narrow-minded, can I just add. And he would have to stand there with his hat and his cloak and protect the house from earthly and unearthly invaders. I find this really fascinating because now we're moving on to the building of Blakesley Hall and properties in the period. And Blakesley Hall was built in such a way that it could be moved at any time. So if you sort of saw a nice place down by the coast, a nice empty area, and thought, oh, I'd like to move there, Blakesley was built in such a way there were little wooden screws and handles that it could be brought down at any time and popped up elsewhere. It wasn't, of course, but the option was always there, which I find fascinating. I think the family liked their acres of land around them way too much to move while the going was good. It was such a lovely rural area in the day. Now, the family owned all this land, but Blakesley was still also built slightly top heavy, and I'll show you a photo towards the end of the video. However, it was only built slightly overhanging, top heavy, because it was fashion of the day. This family had acres of land to play with, so much so that in the 1600s an additional part of the house was built where the kitchens were to be. Also, through some time period, there was a cottage next door as well, and it had a dairy, which I thought was fascinating. And I'll pop another photo on of the dairy with the square in the floor where it would have been, where the cow milk and remnants would be swept down. So another aspect of Tudor life were Tudor pets. pets, and they were very unusual. Magpies in this period were very popular pets. People were fascinated by the way they behaved, stealing jewellery and shiny objects, and they made very entertaining pets in the home. Pets in general were bizarre, and so much so that Henry VIII once received a small monkey as a pet. It was also not uncommon for dogs to be protecting the home and be pets as well. So today you have to wonder, with all the history over 430 years, is there any spiritual presence at Blakesley Hall? And the answer is probably yes. There have been reports of a woman in blue being seen, and the story goes, a window was broken by thugs, and two boys, when visiting the property without their parents, or their parents were nearby, were approached by a lady in a blue dress who questioned them as to whether it was them that had broken the window, and they both said no, they hadn't broken the window. She went on to say how cross she was and that her name was Sarah. After this, she disappeared. So the lady that's been sighted a few times around the house is now known as Sarah. The other sightings that are reported in and around Blakesley are from local residents that live across the street, and sometimes it's reported that the figure, the silhouette of a boy, a young boy, is seen in the attic windows. Now there are problems with this. The first one is that no access to the public is given to the attic. The second is health and safety would not allow a small child in the attic. Also, volunteers and staff at Blakesley also do not visit the attic very often, especially not after hours at night time. So it's quite freaky really, and it's probably a presence or a spirit that's thought to be up there, of possibly an old inhabitant of the hall. Also, local residents that live across the street claim that sometimes the chimneys smoke, and again there are problems with this. Nowadays in Blakesley, no fires are allowed to be lit because it's a health and safety issue. It's a wooden building and fires could easily break out, and the fire service would not be very happy. So once again, this is thought to be an apparition that the locals see. Now, in World War II, Blakesley Hall became damaged because of a bomb that dropped on the nearby houses, and although it was terrible for the structure of the hall and it had to have modern intervention to keep it stable, something was discovered, and when the bomb hit, the ricochet actually knocked some of the plaster off the walls. And when this actually happened, it was found that gorgeous paintings, wall paintings, were discovered from the 16th century underneath the plastered over walls, and from this it gave the people of Blakesley a really good idea of how to design a good replica to hang upon the walls. And underneath them, obviously not for the public, so they could be damaged, they could be exposed for photographs and for internal purposes. So although something bad happened and a metal girder had to be put in the house, something good happened too, with history being uncovered. Obviously Blakesley was a wattle and daub building as well, and it had the herringbone, which I will post pictures towards the end of the video so you can sort of see some of the pictures of the outside and inside of the hall. That was the summary of the history of Blakesley Hall that I learned last night, especially about the Tudor period. I hope you've enjoyed. Before the end, there are going to be some photographs of the hall and some labels such as the overhanging structure and so on, so I hope you enjoy that. So history lovers, I hope you enjoyed seeing the photos that were labelled, and of course seeing the Gilber stone. That is a legend, and it's in the gardens of Blakesley. If you are local, I would definitely recommend visiting. I visited a lot as a child, and its rich Tudor history and general history is just incredible. And I hope you've enjoyed the video of me going through some of the Tudor habits that I found a little bit strange. Thank you so much for watching, history lovers, and I hope to see you all soon. Goodbye.